Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Stephen Bond, with us on the ones and twos like he is for each and every episode. Michael, a lot to get into on the football field, but we saw the report earlier this morning from ESPN. It came from Seth Wickersham, Don Van Natta Jr., and Tisha Thompson on Daniel Snyder and the impending rift between he and the NFL and the other owners. Before we get into the whole thing, just what do you think of this, and what were your first reactions when you read the story this morning?
You know, anytime I read a story like this that has a lot of unnamed sources in it and a lot of them coming from high-level sources, you have to wonder what's the genesis of the story. What's the modus operandi of letting this out? You know, usually the NFL, especially at that owner level, is fairly secretive about what happens, but there's always a reason for why a story is able to get out. And I think this is kind of planting the seeds to basically, like any battle, they're letting everyone know what the enemy has in store. And I think that letting this story out kind of tells the fans, the public, that Snyder's trying to basically blackball the owners with whatever information he might hold at keeping him out. Now, will that work? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it can. But you know this. I mean, they should have known this, Femi, going back to when he bought the team. I mean, when he bought the team, he had a partner with him that they couldn't get the funding right. And then he got rid of the partner. The partner ended up suing him. And then he was able to find a way to get to the team, and they approved him at $800 million. They ignored the Cook family, who was below the offer. So to me, there's a reason for the story.
There's definitely a reason. When you dive into it, it's a long story over on ESPN.com, and it's packed with a lot of different information from all the way in the past when Snyder first bought the team and the arguments he was having at the owners' meetings to all the way up until right now. But in the early portions of the story, it talks about how Snyder recently told a close associate that he has gathered enough secrets to, quote, blow up several NFL owners, the league office, and even Roger Goodell, quote, "They can't F with me," is what he has said privately. Now, Snyder and his lawyers deny that he has said those things privately. But, I mean, as somebody who's an outsider and doesn't know all the inner workings of what's going on in the NFL, we've talked about Snyder briefly throughout the summer on this podcast. This has kind of been my suspicion as to why he's still the owner of the Washington Commanders. It's because he feels that he has something on these other owners, and some of these other owners are maybe saying, you know what, we don't like him, and he's not really bringing anything to the table, but we also don't want to go down that road.
You know, I think that's true, and I think that this franchise is so valued and so sacred in terms of the lore of the NFL, and it's important that the Washington football team, Commanders, or whatever you call them, you know, is good. I mean, when they're good, the NFL's better. It's a little bit like when the Raiders are good, the NFL's better. There's certain teams that the Cowboys, you know, there's certain teams, the Giants, there's certain teams when they're good, you know, it just enhances the whole league because of where they're from. My question, if you're Snyder and you're having this fight, where do you think you're winning? Do you really think you're going to be able to get fans back in the stadium? Do you really think you're going to be able to move the chairs around to get a stadium? Do you think your political influence is going to? Like, you can say you have all this blackmail, but at the end of the day, let's second order think this. Go out. What's he achieved with it? Like, nobody wants him to be an owner. He's destroyed a franchise. I mean, he really has. And so, like, how is he going to repair it? What move could he possibly make to repair this? You know, and so I don't know. I mean, I know he wants to fight to keep his franchise. I know it's really important to him, but he's lost credibility. He's lost trust with the people that support his team. You know, when I was growing up, there was a 5-year waiting list to get tickets to go to RFK Stadium. Now there's, you know, you can buy them for 25 cents on StubHub. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, what do you think could be his end game? Like, okay, I'm gonna keep my franchise, and I'm like, who's buying them? Who really is buying into this?
I don't think anybody is. And the report asked that very question, and here's what a source said, quote, "It's his identity. He's in an elite club full of glass houses, and Snyder not only has no shame," the source says, "he simply doesn't care that he's hated. In fact, he revels in it." A senior executive who knows Snyder says, quote, "I keep wondering, why is he still doing this? Why isn't he selling the team? There's no way out. There's no end game. That's his character flaw. He can't look in the mirror and see what everybody else sees. And my takeaway from reading this whole thing and over the last decade or so is that he's simply delusional. He quite simply is delusional.
Well, most narcissistic people are delusional, and he's certainly qualifies for the head of the narcissistic class here. I mean, there's no denying it. And, and it's never been about winning for Dan Snyder. It's always been about winning the way I want to win Dan Snyder. It's never been about the wins. It's always been we have to win a certain way. And I just think, to me, that's really hard. And I don't think that'll ever change. Again, there's no end game here. There really is no end game. And, he can threaten. I mean, one thing I know about the billionaires club that is the NFL owners is they can fight back with the best of them as well. And they control the narrative. They will end up controlling the narrative, just like how this story got out. They're going to control how to do this better than anybody.
And one thing that has been reported is that Dan Snyder has hired private investigators to look into other NFL owners, league executives, as well as Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the National Football League. And the NFL and sources in the league offices have said that they're aware that people are being looked into by private investigators. That's one tactic that Snyder has gone toward in the past as kind of a sign of a little bit of a retaliation there on others who might speak out against him. And a lot of this stems from the sexual assault allegation that's against Snyder from an instance back in 2009, allegedly on a team plane with an employee there on his own private jet. So there's a lot to this story that I'm sure we will get into going into the further weeks and into the months as well. And one quick thing that was talked about as potentially could save Snyder in this position is maybe if they're able to acquire a new stadium, but that's also a backdoor channel as to why they might be able to get him all the way out if they don't waive the loan.
They're never getting a stadium. He needs the league office to cooperate with them to get that. Look, this is the Sopranos type. I mean, he's now Richie Aprile. Like, there's no way he can get out of this. Like, he has no, like, Richie Aprile came back. He thought he had all the dirt on everybody, thought he was going to get, but this is like, he's never going to be able to do this. Like, there's no end game here. Now, in other businesses like the Sopranos, usually, they go to a hill with pine cones. That's where Richie Aprile is. So I don't see the end game. I didn't see the end game for Daniel Sterling. I didn't see the end game for, even though the Phoenix Suns owner was fined, once LeBron and Chris Paul and everybody else came out against him, he had no choice. And he was as defiant as Snyder was. And he said, I'm goodbye. I mean, you're going to have to take your money and go home, aren't you?
One would think. And this report, once again, came from Seth Wickersham, Don Van Natta Jr., and Tisha Thompson over at ESPN. We'll add the link to it when we post the podcast for those who want to read the full story, because there's a lot to get to in there, and we don't have enough time to delve into every single detail. But, Michael, let's take our first break. We'll talk about Snyder's team, the Washington Commanders, who host the Chicago Bears.
You're so excited when you see Justin Fields tonight, aren't you? You're so excited.
I'm excited,
man.
Get
your seatbelt on.
I'm excited.
You're so excited. You're going to be so happy.
The whole world gets to see my man Justin Fields. We'll get into that game on the other side. All right, Michael, Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. Not sure that this is what Jeff Bezos had in mind when he took on the Thursday night package, but we have the Washington Commanders and the Chicago Bears right now over at our show sponsor, DraftKings. The Commanders, 1-point road favorites, the total sitting at 38. And this is going to be one that it might be an eyes bleed experience for the folks who are watching at home, but it's an NFL game nonetheless, and my man Justin Fields gets to show out on primetime.
Yeah, he gets to show you that how he can complete. What's he got? 49 completions in 5 games. I mean, how that's not bad, Femi. I mean, Bergen Catholic here in Jersey, they get fit. They get more than that. Don Bosco Prep gets more than that. No big deal. It's all good. Everybody's saying it's fine. Poor Mike Martz, he took a wrath of shit for it. But look, I mean, just simple completions are hard for the team. This is part of our conversation that we had in the last block. When Chicago and Washington aren't great teams, it hurts the league. I mean, these are storied franchises, And I wrote about, to me, I wrote about this in the next book. I mean, George Preston Marshall's in the Hall of Fame. I'm not sure that belongs there, because of his indiscretions. George Halas does. I mean, these are 2 storied franchises that at one time, when the great Sid Luckman played and they had the 73-0 game and all that. But I'm going to enjoy it, Femi. I'm going to enjoy watching Justin Fields to see how they navigate this. I'm surprised at how well the Bears have competed and tried to stay attached in the games that they've played. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, this is a talent level. Can they run the ball? Washington the last 2 weeks have played pretty good run defense. It's going to be interesting to see if they can actually, if they can't run the ball and it becomes a passing game, which I don't know if it would, because Chicago never wants to even get there. They're the lowest league in attempts this year so far. Mm-hmm. This should be a Washington win. I mean, plus, your boy Rivera's feeling the heat a little bit.
He's definitely feeling the heat. Earlier this week, he told the media, when asked about the difference between the Washington Commanders and the other three teams in the NFC East, he simply said quarterback. Now, he has since apologized to the team and Carson Wentz, and we know that this has become a thing inside that locker room and in the media with Wentz and the criticism that he's suffered. But according to ESPN's, or rather NFL Network's Tom Pelissero, Commanders quarterback Carson Wentz dealing with the biceps tendon strain that he suffered in the loss to the Tennessee Titans on Sunday. He's not at 100%, but he'll start tonight against the Bears and then try to heal up with extra rest coming off of Thursday night's game here. So Wentz already under a lot of pressure, now is a little compromised tonight.
Yeah, and that offensive line doesn't really help him very much. I mean, he's taken a lot of hits and he's taken a lot of, and he fumbled 3 times last week in the game against Tennessee, and obviously turned the ball over in the red zone. So, but this is a game where Washington's defense, if they can just play better run defense and don't give up the big play and make Fields get in a bunch of third downs, 15 or more third downs. But to me, I give Eberflus credit. He's trying to manage the game based on his talent level. The thing that always has bothered me about Rivera, he never does that. He never does that. And Rivera, acts as if he's won 5 Super Bowls. Like, at some point, don't blame the players. Don't blame. You got to be accountable. He made no changes to his coaching staff this offseason, right? So what does that tell you, right? So it's either players, coaches, or schemes. And so he's saying, look, there was nothing wrong. We just players have to play better. That's a hard sell.
That's 2-time Coach of the Year, Ron Rivera, that you're talking about there.
But he's not only had 3 winning seasons in 11 years, and I mean and it's like he has I'm just saying, tell me, when you watch this team tonight, tell me, do they nail the details down? Are they well coached? Are they fundamentally sound? I don't never see any of that. Mm-mm. I know he was a former player, and that gives him entitlement that he knows the game. But at some point, where is the results? I know he said Cam Newton's the results. Let's be honest. It is a quarterback league, and Cam Newton gave him those 3 great seasons.
Who wins tonight?
Washington should win tonight. Should win tonight, but Chicago, they play home and they play they stay attached to the team, and they try to make a play here to play there, like they did against the Giants. And even though they didn't win the game, they were made. He throws a couple of them up there, and if Mooney makes a couple plays down the field, I got to go with Washington. Though, to me, if Washington doesn't win this game, thank God Dan Snyder's at elbow and he's fighting these battles on another face. Like, he truly is like Napoleon. He's fighting battles on all these fronts. He don't have time to pay attention to Ron Rivera, but if he did, this would be the end of it.
Ron Rivera's former employer, the Carolina Panthers, recently moved on from Matt Rule earlier this week. Now a lot of people looking at the Panthers and some of their veteran players potentially in some trade situations. We'll break down those guys, including Christian McCaffery on the other side. This is the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. All right, Michael, the Carolina Panthers fired Matt Rule this Monday here, and now a lot of folks are looking at some of the talented players on this Panthers roster as potential trade candidates. And we're going to start with the running back, the all-pro Christian McCaffrey. Maybe some top landing spots. I know there have been reports that maybe that the Buffalo Bills have reached out. They have denied those reports. Maybe the Eagles, the 49ers, Rams, Broncos. Do you think McCaffrey should be a player who is sought after? And if so, where do you think he would be the best fit?
I think obviously he's a really talented player, and he's trying to stay healthy this year, which is critically important to his career. But I don't see the Panthers. I mean, I spent a lot of time listening to Tepper's press conference, which, as Yogi Berra said, I think you can learn a lot from listening. I think there was a lot there in his conference, and he talked about asset management, and he talked about, you only have so many assets, whether it's players, draft picks, salary cap. I get the sense that, yes, they want a quarterback. Yes, they probably would do everything to move up to get a quarterback. But I don't think they're going to have a fire sale. It's not fair to Steve Wilks to have a fire sale. They're going to give Steve Wilks every chance to win games over the next, what do they have, the next 11 games, 12 games? So, I mean, and McCaffrey has to be on the team for them to win. Now, do I think Robbie Anderson would be one of those guys they trade? Without a doubt. Do I think that they would dump guys that aren't playing very well? Sure. I think that's not. But I don't think it's going to be anybody that could affect Wilks' ability to win the game. I think that they want to be able to get in position to basically use their assets. But what job are they going? Well, who are they going to allure if they tear the team down? Who are they going to allure? And so I know I listened to Sean Payton the other day talk about, would he be interested? And Payton was very clear. He really likes working at Fox. Would that job? I don't know. But I think to me, the problem is, like all these jobs that open, they don't have a quarterback. Every job never does a job open. It's rare that Green Bay open, where you walk into a starting quarterback. I mean, that's the issue. So, but while you don't have a quarterback, you can't let your team just completely fall apart.
Now, how much should we make of general manager Scott Fitterer? He's been there since January of 2021, so he's gone through two drafts here with the Panthers, but maybe they want more assets to ensure that they could potentially get a quarterback in this upcoming class here, the 2023 class, which is seen as a pretty talented quarterback draft. How much should we make of maybe Fitterer? A lot of these guys who are being rumored are not guys that he drafted.
Well, I think ultimately, what can you get for those guys? Are you going to get a second round pick for somebody? That's what you're going to need to move up in the draft. You're going to need a bunch of twos. People say we're going to get assets. Well, I mean, if you get a fourth round pick, does that really help you moving up in the draft? Of course not. So ask the question, what player could you trade that you could get a high number one pick for? I don't think there's anybody. I don't think anybody's giving you a one for McCaffrey, even though he's a really good player. But he's got durability issues. He's got a cap number, so like at some point, like you say, well, we're going to collect assets. Like it's the NBA. Everybody takes the Oklahoma Thunder model or the Utah, and they think this is what's going to happen. That's not the way the NBA works. That's not the way the NFL works. They don't have a Donovan Mitchell. Nobody's given up that many assets. Nobody's given up so much for Rudy Gobert. Nobody's given up all that stuff for certain players, for Harden and all that. It's a different sport. And to get one of those high picks, you're going to have to collect a bunch of twos. And who's trading away twos and threes if they have a chance to win this year? I don't think very many teams are.
I think the only players that would warrant a first or second round pick that they have on their team are Brian Burns and DJ Moore. But those are guys that you're going to want to keep. those are young DJ players. Moore.
They need Burns. We wrote today for the Daily Coach about Bill Walsh's vision for blueprint. There's culture and then there's a vision for how to win games, right? And most people thought Walsh was a guy that wanted to have, receivers and all that. This is what's so misunderstood about Bill Walsh was the number one thing he wanted to have was defense. And the number two thing he wanted to have is pass rushers who could win the game in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. Like that, to me, is how you build a team for sustainable success. They have some of that in Carolina.
Yeah, to me, I don't think there's really much that they could do. Maybe Robbie Anderson, like you hinted at. McCaffrey, how much do you think?
They would dump Robbie Anderson in a minute if they could, I mean, he doesn't really make any plays, and how do they get that? I mean, so to me, McCaffrey's a really good player, but that would just kill their offensive chance. I mean, like if you do that, then basically everybody in the building just goes flat. And so when you fire a coach, there's tentacles within the building where the coaches are very nervous. They'll start looking for jobs. They start spending more time on the phone trying to line up their next job than they do working on the opponent. And when you make a move that dramatic and you're only playing 17 games, then you have a lot of people not working on the opponent and you lose the season. Football is such a different sport than baseball or basketball.
What would you, if you were a general manager of one of the other 31 teams, what would you give up for Christian McCaffrey, and what would you give up for Robbie Anderson?
I probably wouldn't give up very much for Robbie because he's got a huge contract. Even though he's if I were the Rams, his contract, I can't get him under my cap, right? They can't. Mm-hmm. This is the whole problem with Odell. They don't have enough cap room to really give Odell a substantial offer. But if you're like the Green Bay Packers and you want an outside receiver, okay, maybe you give him a 6th round pick or a 5th round pick or something like that. You're not going to give very much. You're not. I mean, there's just you're basically unloading the contract is more than anything, And so that's the other thing in the NFL is when you make a trade, everybody's asking yourself the question: how many years do I get back from the contract? Now, we've seen trades at the trading deadline where a team needs a receiver on the desk, but Robbie didn't play well last year, and he hasn't played well this year. So, am I really getting a good player, or am I getting a name player?
What about McCaffrey?
I mean, I think you could probably get a 2 for McCaffrey. I think there's no doubt. I mean, he's a good player. He is, but you've got to be concerned about durability. He's been on the injury list every week this week, but is that going to get you enough to move up? Does that really help your team? Now, if you did it in the offseason, different story, right? If you did it in the offseason, you'd have a better chance. Now's not the time. You lose the building if you do that now. I'm just telling you, the building just quits on you. You might as well. And if that's what he wants to do, if he wants to basically get the first pick in the draft and pick C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young or whomever the best quarterback is, then basically just tear it all down and don't say to the public, look, Steve Wilks has a chance to keep his job. He should have just gone on the way it was. What's fascinating about all these conversations, is I still go back to Stefanski's decision to go for it on 4th and inches and from his own. If just think about this, if that kid who missed the field goal against the Chargers, Cody Davis, I think his name is, or Cody York,
Cade York, yeah,
Cade York. If he misses that field goal opening day, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about Matt Rule not having his job.
Mm-hmm. If Frankie Louvu catches the pick 6 from Daniel Jones in week 2, we're not having this conversation, but that's how the NFL goes. It's a bottom line business. It's a couple swings in here and there, but all of a sudden you find yourself in a bad spot and looking for a new head coach. Michael, let's take our final break. We'll get to Sunday slate on the other side, which has some juicy matchups, including Bills-Chiefs, the rematch.
I can't wait to hear who you love. I can't wait.
All right, Michael, let's get to Sunday slate here, and the best matchup on the board might be the best matchup the entire NFL season. It's the rematch of last year's AFC divisional round, 13 seconds, those fateful words out there in Western New York. Nobody wants to hear about it, but they have a chance to correct it this Sunday. Bills taking on the Kansas City Chiefs out at Arrowhead Stadium over at our show sponsor, DraftKings. Buffalo, 2.5-point favorites. The total 54, expecting a lot of fireworks this Sunday. How do you see this one playing out?
Femi, I spent a lot of time watching that Raider-Chief tape, and I got to tell you, man, the Raiders left some points on the field. I mean, the Chiefs struggled to cover the Raiders man-to-man. Waller gets hurt on the first touchdown pass to Devontae Adams, and he's wide open. He's running a crosser route. He's wide open. That hurt them because they didn't have anybody who could really match up to him, but they didn't have anybody really that could cover any of the Raiders receivers. They had guys open pretty much the whole game. Other than, Hunter Renfrow didn't play to a level that we've seen him play before. So to me, I think Buffalo's a team on a mission. I think they can block them. I think Josh Allen's going to be able to make plays. Who's covering Gabriel Davis? Who's going to cover Isaiah McKenzie if he's healthy to play? I think this is one of those games where the Bills offense, unless they make a lot of mistakes and turn the ball over, they turned it over 4 times in Los Angeles and still won the game. Now, look, I think the Chiefs are still well coached, a good team, but what we saw Monday night was their inability to make explosive plays. They were just very fortunate. They were so good in the red zone. I mean, they were really good in the red zone. And then 4 for 4 with Kelsey. But I think, to me, this game, to me, I think it has the makings of Buffalo just takes the game over and wins it and runs away with it.
I completely agree with you. I think the Bills are the best team in the league, and it's not even really close. And also, to echo your statements there about the Chiefs, I wasn't impressed Monday night, and in fact, I even tweeted it, and I said it on our show on VSiN Live Bet tonight. I don't think the Chiefs are Super Bowl contenders. I don't know what your read on this team is, but they don't scare you offensively like they once did when Tyreek Hill was out wide, and it opened things up for everybody else underneath. You don't really get that fear factor anymore.
No, but Mahomes is still great. I think he's playing at a higher level this year than he did any time last year. I thought Andy Reid, when I saw him shake hands with Josh McDaniels at the end of the game, he had a look on his face like, man, we got lucky. With a lot of great calls in the second half that went his way that were made up for that horrible, I'm still looking for the
defensive holding.
I'm still looking for that call. The worst call of that game was that the Raiders were up 20-7. And they run 3 plays, and the next thing you know, they're down 24-20. I mean, the Chiefs won the middle 8 and won that. Yep. And the play that killed the Raiders more than any play in the game was the pick play on Mac Hollins, which wasn't a pick play, which he was just running around. It was not a intentional, we're going to pick this against man coverage. That guy called that play. I mean, I could show you clips. Chris Jones lined up offsides the entire game. I mean, his helmet was in the neutral zone the entire game, right? And they never called that. Yet they call something like that over there. It's just one of those. I wrote about this in VSiN. When you go back in time, what people don't understand, the rivalry between these teams go back to the AFL days. And it goes back to when Al Davis was the commissioner. And I wrote about this in my new book. Al Davis was the commissioner, and there was a hidden rule in the league that basically the gentleman's agreement between the AFL and the NFL, no veterans could sign. Well, the Giants, Wellington Mara, broke that rule. He signed Gogolak, the kicker from Buffalo, even though Buffalo wanted him back. Mm-hmm. And that launched the AFL into signing Roman Gabriel, Mike Ditka, John Brody to future contracts. And they were just ready to take it on. And little did Al Davis know that Lamar Hunt and Tex Schramm were negotiating a deal at the Love parking lot in Love Field in Dallas. And that agreement became the merger. And Al never knew about that. And Al carried that with him. And so that's what's intensified this rivalry for so damn long. And I thought we did. But going back to your initial thought, I don't see the Chiefs being able to match this team offensively. They're going to have to control the ball and keep if Buffalo only has the ball 23 minutes, I think they still can win. But I think that it's going to be harder to win that way.
It's going to be a really fun game. I can't wait to see it this coming Sunday. No bet for me in this game, but I still think the Buffalo Bills go ahead and win this one.
Guts. Take Buffalo and lay the points. Come on, Femi. Come on.
We'll see. I got to take a look at the injury report. Jordan Poyer, Tremont Edmonds. I'll make sure those guys are playing, because those guys didn't play last week against the Steelers. I want to make sure those guys on the back end are playing for this Bills defense. The Packers, Michael, come back to the States here after losing to the New York Giants last week overseas in London, hosting the New York Jets. So the once easy Sinatra special of Giants-Jets back-to-back weeks, not proving to be very easy, but they're 7.5-point favorites over at DraftKings against Robert Saleh's Jets.
That went up to 7.5. It was 7 for now we're taping this Thursday morning. Do you have faith? I mean, my line on this game is 5.56. I have no chance at taking the Jets. I wouldn't do it. That would be the team I would have to take. But look, can Zach Wilson? I mean, the last 2 weeks with the Jets now, they've scored 21 points in the fourth quarter against Miami, closer game than the score. They scored 14 points in the fourth quarter against the Steelers. They finished strong. You got to give them credit for that. Can they do it against Green Bay? Green Bay's defense last week, Femi, made me want to puke. It was bad. Yeah. It was bad against all the quick play action, the under routes, all that stuff that the Jets will run. The Jets will just repeat that. Can they fix it? I don't know. I would lean towards the Jets here. You?
I think I'd lean towards the Packers, just because the Jets coming off of the win against the Dolphins, and that was the third-string quarterback, Skylar Thompson, on prep.
I would Justin Fields. You're just going down the road.
I'm not buying into Robert Saleh. So I would back the Packers in this spot. I haven't bet this game yet, but I'm going to look to maybe bet the Packers in some form or fashion.
Joe Barry. So you got the lesser of two evils. You're going to go with Joe Barry. Okay, good.
Yeah, and I'll take Aaron Rodgers. I think he can get it right. Although he has a thumb issue, is what they were reporting yesterday. So we'll see if the thumb is not a problem there for Aaron Rodgers. Vikings and the Dolphins down in South Beach. We mentioned Skylar Thompson. It appears he's going to get his first career start in the NFL. The rookie out of Kansas State hosting Minnesota. Right now, the Dolphins 3-point underdogs at home. Total 45.5 at our show sponsor, DraftKings. This Vikings team, man, I know they're 4-1, and I know that they've been winning games, but they don't look right. And Kevin O'Connell, I think he's a little in over his head right now as a head coach. I think this is going to be a closer game than people think.
I think so, too. With Skylar Thompson gets a whole week to practice. He was good this preseason. They say Tyreek Hill's going to play. I mean, this secondary from Minnesota, I don't think is very good. And I'm surprised they're this much of a favorite against. Now, Miami's defense has not played well. They're bad on third down. Cousins is good when he's protected. Miami's got to get some pressure on him, and they've got to take Jefferson out of the game. They got to take Jefferson. They can't. What Miami will do is the same thing they did, when they played a couple weeks ago. When they lost to who did they lose? Cincinnati. When they played Cincinnati, they double chase and they put Howard over on Higgins, T. Higgins. And so I think they'll do the same thing. I think they'll put Howard on Thielen and they'll double chase they'll double Jefferson all over the field. And if that happens, then somebody else has got to win the game. And to me, I think I'm with you. I take Miami and take the home dog here. Why not?
That's what I would lean with if I had to bet the game as well here. Real quick thoughts: Ravens Giants. Who do you think wins this one?
Oh, I think the Giants are beat up in their secondary. Coming back off that trip, I think they're really beat up. You can hear I'm in New York here, Femi. The police are coming to get us. I mean, this is probably what John Dillinger felt like when he was in the cabin there and he heard the police coming. We got to get out of here. I think the Giants are beat up in their secondary, and I think Baltimore's got a bunch of injuries. New York's done a great job of staying attached, and I think Sir Don Martindale knows how to play against Lamar, practiced against him. I think it's a close game. I'm surprised this line's inching up. The 6 points seems a little bit too much. But the one thing I think the Ravens have always done when they've played against lesser teams is they've dominated.
Yeah, and that's what I'm buying into. I went ahead and bet Ravens laying 5 there with Baltimore. Finally, Sunday Night Football, Michael. My Dallas Cowboys on the road in Philadelphia taking on the Eagles. The Eagles 6.5-point favorites, total 42. It'll once again be Cooper Rush starting for America's team.
Man, did that line move? It was 5 when it opened. Now it's up to 6.5. You think it gets to 7 by Sunday?
If it does, I might have to bet my squad if it gets to 7.
Man. I mean, look, the Eagles' offense the last 2 weeks have not been flying at the highest level. I mean, we've got to check Micah Parsons' injury to see where he is.
Yep.
The one thing I think that's misknown about this game is the Eagles' defense has played as well as the Cowboys' defense. They don't get as much publicity, but they've played really well, and they've taken games over. I think this is going to be a really hard game for Dallas. I don't think they're going to be able to run the football against them, and Cooper Rush is going to have to complete more than 10 points. I see why this line's moving towards Philly.
Yeah, the big thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is that Cowboys pass rush against the best offensive line in football, Philadelphia Eagles. They appear to be getting healthier. Jordan Mailata didn't play last week against the Cardinals. It sounds like he should play this week at left tackle. And if Parsons is compromised, if they have to only rush him situationally like they did toward the second half against the Rams, could spell trouble for my team here against a really good Eagles attack. But Michael, that's the Sunday slate. I know you're busy out there in New York. Sounds like the sirens have left you, so maybe they're looking for somebody else.
Yeah, I think so. I think Billy and I were not going to get arrested, so we're all good.
Yeah, it's good to hear because we want you back on Monday as we recap all the happenings from Week 6 here in the National Football League. Thank you to DraftKings. Thank you to VSiN. As always, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. And thank you to our producer, Stephen Bond, with us on the ones and twos. And Michael, have a good time out there in the Big Apple, and we'll talk to you Monday.
I'll be back I'll be back tomorrow on air. Thank you. Appreciate it, Femi. Thank you, Stephen Bond.
Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.